Live from the virtual Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas, we say good afternoon, race fans, and welcome to week 2 of the eNASCAR International iRacing Series. And happy as always to have you strapped into the virtual seat and along for the ride with us alongside Justin Prince. My name is Evan Kosoko. Justin had a thriller of an opener last time out at Brands Hatch, where it was the NASCAR Wheel and Euro Series drivers who dominated. But of course, we opened tonight's coverage with the news from yesterday that NASCAR and iRacing have announced a new official partnership that sees iRacing become the official simulation partner of NASCAR.
And that is huge for iRacing because it has the potential to have a lot of growth. For example, the Chicago Street Course comes to mind in recent months on some of the developments between NASCAR and iRacing. It's going to be exciting to see what the future holds for this partnership.
It'll be exciting to see how it grows. It's been a licensee partnership that's been going on since 2010, and excited for the future of this iRacing and NASCAR partnership. Of course, this International Series, one of the most unique we've seen, featuring drivers from all across the globe, including from the NASCAR Peak Mexico Series, the NASCAR Wheel and Euro Series, the NASCAR Pinty Series, and select drivers from NASCAR's Drive for Diversity. And I mentioned, Justin, that it was those Euro NASCAR drivers who dominated at Brands Hatch last time out. Simon Pilot absolutely blitzed the field and led a Euro NASCAR 1-2-3 finish. We talked about the importance of that Brands Hatch race because Euro NASCAR is actually racing there this upcoming weekend. But tonight is a very different challenge. We head stateside. We go from a really short track at that Indy Circuit of Brands Hatch to a big one here at Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas. We just saw NASCAR Cup racing. We just saw NASCAR Pro Invitational iRacing Series racing here, and now it's time for the International Series.
It's going to be exciting to see how these drivers tackle the circuit because it's much different compared to Brands Hatch in many different ways. But for competitors, I'm expecting to see various different series contenders shuffled up as a result here with this different type of racetrack. As it's going to be different challenges in terms of braking, different challenges in terms of potential handling, Evan, and it's going to make things extremely tricky for our drivers tonight for our respective series.
It's going to be a lot of driver versus track. Might be a little bit messy off of the get-go, but once these drivers get spaced out, we'll see who's able to find speed, adjust as the run goes on. And we talk about COTA, of course, designed for the US F1 Grand Prix, but NASCAR made their debut. They were a very successful race weekend there just a couple of weeks back. This is a behemoth of a racetrack, Justin. A lot of high-speed corners, a lot of heavy braking zones. Of course, the S's on the front straightaway make this racetrack so unique.
More than 3+ miles in circuit length plus kilometers around this facility, 20 turns open in 2012, 130 feet of elevation changes, just about 9 miles from the nearby airport and 15 miles from downtown Austin. It brings plenty of challenges with the elevation, but as well in the first part of the circuit with the sausage curbs. It's going to be very tricky to make your way around the circuit cleanly tonight.
Yeah, turn one is that signature corner, a tight hairpin at the crest of a 133-foot rise on the front stretch. Let's go take a look at your International Series starting grid this afternoon from COTA, and it is a debut race for Agustin Canapino, who will bring us to the green flag alongside Leonel Pinera in the number 2 spot. Paul Giuffreau, last week's winner, Simon Pilot on row 2, with David Dallara and Ruben Garcia at the top 6.
Paul Jourdain starts in 7th tonight with Victor Barros Jr. in 8th position, with Giorgio Maggi in the 9th spot. Roger Group will start in 10th with Trey Lapsevich rounding out row 6 along with Nick Sanchez.
Handful of drivers as well here need some work to do. Jake Cozio and Justin Campbell alongside Abraham Calderon and Jaden Reyna. I'll look top to bottom. Those are the 16 drivers to take a time into qualifying. Alex de Alba, Regina Servant, and Andres Perez de Lara will start from the rear after not taking a time in the qualifying session. This race, Justin, as we walked through it, we talked about how many laps we had at Brands Hatch, 70, but because this racetrack is so massive, the lap count a little bit shorter, 25 laps in distance. We're still looking at a race on the stopwatch that'll be about an hour. We saw that a clean start was key, but there was a lot of mistakes, especially in the final 1/3 of that opening race last week. So these drivers being able to be sharp as we now roll, I think it'll be critical here in the long run.
I've seen plenty of drivers struggling in Sector 1 in particular to make their way around the racetrack in final practice. It's going to make things very intriguing once we get underway, because that was a spot where in the eNASCAR Coco iRacing series, drivers were challenged in turn 1 and as well all the way up towards turn 10. So it's going to be a complex that will bring plenty of challenges right from the get-go. As well, it's going to be important for drivers to build up speed from turn 11 down to turn 12, down that backstretch, to be able to build up some of the biggest passing opportunities for today.
It'll be a fun one as this field rolls. We're looking at a field of 19 drivers, several of them making their first starts of the series. Of course, the Argentine and Agustin Canapino was not with us last week, and he's on pole for this one. We'll have a couple of unique perspectives as well. We'll be taking these onboard looks in with these drivers over the course of this 25-lap race. And because it is the International Series, Justin, we'll reference that this COTA racetrack clocks in at 3.426 miles. That translates to 5.513 kilometers per lap, as the pace car going to dive down this time, and we'll see that very exciting run up to turn number 1 for the first time this afternoon. As always, happy that you're spending a Wednesday evening with us on the iRacing Esports Network for round number 2 of the eNASCAR International iRacing Series. Pace car off, Agustin Canapino in control of the field as we say, let's go racing in Austin. Some 3-4 wide, middle of the road, a couple of overshoots, and there's a touch and a spin in the middle of the racetrack. So one driver gets booted out of line. There you see it is the number 2 machine of Calderon who has those issues. Other than that, everybody else survives. Justin, first time to the S's.
And that was the fear coming in, I think, for a couple drivers, because you never know where some of the drivers could break. Some of them would see the opportunity possibly to late break their way into the corner to try and gain some positions. We also had some bumping and banging, keep in mind, for the battle for second position. And I think Parnia might want that spot back after how aggressive of a send was sent by the 64 to start.
We saw the aggressiveness. Those drivers felt like that early opportunity was a chance for them to make some moves. And as we work our way to the back straightaway for the first time, let's take a second look from down in turn number 1. You can see the middle of the racetrack at 1.4 wide. Somebody was way out to the outside. But there is that Tua Calderon. He was on his own fine. And then right there, the slice back to the inside is what finishes him off. Got an extra touch. And that's how he ended up off. And that'll drop Calderon towards the rear of the field, still ahead of De Alba and Servant, who also had a little bit of a slow start. But up front, Canapino pulling away for the race lead early on in this one. Paul Jouffreau in second spot, but look further back. Lots of 2-wide action. This is all led by Jake Cosio in the number 10 spot, David Delara as well in the mix, but for 9th on back, the mid-pack battle. How's that for a touch? Is driving it in is Carruth.
I think Carruth just missed the braking zone because it's so easy to do so here in the arena section, as well as the potential for wheel hop, Evan. So many times I've seen drivers here in this complex with this car just have that issue where they try and send it a little bit deeper than some other drivers, and it's just that hard to make it stick in the corner.
Difficult, going to be something that these drivers have to work with. It is also a hot and slick racetrack under the Austin sun. The temperature is 78 degrees Fahrenheit. That translates to a track temperature of 120 degrees Fahrenheit. As Victor Morales trying to make a dive to the inside, a little bit further back in the running order, and up towards the front, that's Leonel Pernia, who just had a surprise entry late into this one, found himself towards the top of the board, second in practice, second in qualified, right now third on track, but there's a mistake. Too much curb in the S's, and that may result in a slowdown penalty. Got a lot of that yellow sausage curb, and it kicked that car way up and in the air.
And it's at this track a very dangerous thing to hit those sausage curbs, because they do exactly what you've seen there. They launch your suspension up into the ground. There's so many drivers in practice as well I've seen learned that experience in preparation for tonight, watching along with some of the action. But getting back to Pernia's background, first place in 2019 in the Super TC 2000 in Argentina. A lot of experience in that machine from 75 tonight.
And trying to obviously put that experience to use as you go on board there with the number 14 Machida Giorgio Maggi. You can see all of the race suits, fire suits in the back end of his shot. Had that onboard perspective with the NASCAR Peak Mexico Series driver last time out. Big thanks to him as well for giving us the onboard perspective this time. A little bit of a lock up into a heavy braking zone there. That's turn number 12, Justin. It's a 20 turn road course here at Circuit of the Americas. And I talked about those high speed areas. That left-hander in 12 where we picked him up as one of them, because at the end of the back straightaway, these NASCAR Xfinity Series cars nearly at about 170 miles an hour. The stadium section, though, much slower here on the back end of the lap.
Yeah, these drivers were going as slow as 50 miles per hour, maybe carrying as much as 100 miles an hour to be able to properly make their way through the section. Any more than that, and there's a chance they overshoot that racetrack. And in turn, we see what happened to Carruth as we follow along with Paul Joffro now, who is still following along in second position and has been able to pull away from the pack. If anything, starting to reel in Augustin Canapino a little bit.
Doing his best to close things in. Joffro started this race in third, made the quick pass up to the number 2 position, and as you can see, working with the, I think he's got the gloves on as well. So racing seat. Again, these drivers can do so many different things to customize their sim racing experience to make it as realistic as possible. As there's a spinner towards the back, Ruben Garcia running in 9th position at a spin in turn number 1. It was a bit of a dive bomb on David Delara for 8th and 9th. Only Garcia spun. And it costs the 88 significant positions. He loses at least 4 in that exchange. So that was a theme. Mainly in the second half of the race, I felt like Justin, where drivers started to make more and more mistakes, that you lost a little bit of that mental sharpness with drivers having errors and already a little bit of contact tonight. But I think most of the contact we saw in Brands Hatch was some of the lapped cars, right, who really couldn't adapt to that track. And it was mostly some of the American drivers, that we talk about how the Whelen Euro Series drivers race there in real life, so they have that bit of experience to tap back in on. But some of the drivers who hadn't raced the Brands Hatch struggled a lot, and it really caused some issues with lap traffic, mainly because Brands Hatch, the Indy circuit, was so small. Here at COTA, we've got tons of real estate, so surprised we've seen that much touching early.
Yeah, but at the same time, the reason for all the bouncing and bumping against one another is it's the opportunity for drivers to make battles for positions, and it can be difficult to make a pass here in stock car at times, because the arena section, you're essentially hoping to force a mistake. The backstretch, you're trying to outpower that driver down the backstretch rather. In turn 1, it sometimes comes to the power of the braking without locking up the car and locking up your left front tire. So all of that's all a balancing act, and at the same time, it can be very tricky to become lap traffic here. There were some drivers we've seen for eNASCAR Coca-Cola competition who had some troubles, but we're maybe half a track behind. It's going to be that type of a night where it's going to really test the competitors overall on their patience and their ability to be able to make moves in battles such as this one.
Patience is a key. This race will not have cautions, will not have restarts, so that's why mistakes hurt. It was a theme that we talked about just last night with the Road America race for the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series races. Up the road, that's Justin Campbell looking to the inside of the 20 of Trayton Lapsovich. He'll stay in front for the moment, and Raja Carruth the front of them all. One of NASCAR's Drive for Diversity drivers in the number 13 machine. So the battle you're looking at right now is for position 8 on back. That's kind of where the big jump is. Your top 7 cars within about 8 seconds of the race leader, and then a big gap back here to the midfield battle from 8th on back.
Keep in mind, Roger Carruth and Trayton Lapsovich, known for their short track racing abilities in the real world. But Trayton Lapsovich getting ready for real world action. In fact, this week in Ontario, Canada, Roger Carruth as well, known for putting on some good experience in the Sims. So there's various different experience levels coming in as the battle for P2 all of a sudden has heated up, as Pernia is looking for an opportunity to try and carve his way by the 64.
We were just talking that it was Paul Giuffreau who was closing in for the battle for the lead, but all of a sudden, Lionel Pernia is going to keep himself in this conversation. He started in second. He was the one that Giuffreau made a move on early in this race, but they are going to go back and forth now for second, and the more this battle continues, the better it'll be for Augusto Di Canapino up front, who pulls away as Pernia, looking to the outside, tries to go for the undercut. Won't happen yet, but certainly within striking distance in the battle for P2, left-hand side of your screen, in that mid-pack battle on the right.
Justin Campbell doing a very solid job today here at Circuit of the Americas. Had a rough time at moments at Brands Hatch, doing a great job in that battle for 8th position, but the tough thing here, Evan, is trying to keep the car and the momentum on the long run, because tire fall off can go off for at least a few seconds here. And right now, Giuffreau is having that issue where the fall off is hitting stronger compared to Canapino and Pernia. That's where I think some of the struggles are coming into play, especially with the hot track. And here comes the opportunity to the inside.
Makes the dive into turn number one, but it is such a late apex. I didn't think it was going to work, but Giuffreau flinches. Had the better entry, but got a little bit sideways. It opens up the door, and Lionel Pernia makes that pass, goes right back into the number 2 position, and that will set his sights on the race leader, Canapino, who has been able, courtesy of this fight for second, to open up his race lead advantage to the tune of about 5.7 seconds. Just in that turn number 1, the inside is always so wide open just because of so tight that hairpin is. I didn't think he'd be able to make it stick. He did, and now Giuffreau is going to try to chase him back down on board with the 64.
Tell what that is from some of the confidence when it comes to this racetrack in the varying levels of experience across the field. As now, Giuffreau, you can see right now just trying to get back into a rhythm. That's the key thing. Get yourself focused, get yourself to where you don't lose too much time compared to battles such as this where they're costing yourself oodles of time. Where this side-by-side can cost you upwards of about 1 second per lap. So you need to be smart when you try and make these moves if you get the opportunity.
And now we pick up that battle in the middle of the field once more. Ruben Garcia trying to make up for some spots lost early in this race. He'll look down to the inside on Justin Campbell, jumps the curbs, and I think was a little bit too aggressive on that one, had to slow down, and we'll try to reset once more. But remember, Garcia started this race in the number 6 spot, had that off in turn number 1 on the opening couple of laps of this race. I think it was not 2 or 3, got turned on a drive down to the inside, lost a handful of positions. He's trying to fight for them back, but it is not just pressure that he is applying, because he has been under fire this entire time. But the driver behind him, and Giorgio Maggi, that driver right behind the number 14 machine. So drivers try to make some moves in this mid-pack, Justin, but working lap number 5, already 1/5 of the way through this second round of the eNASCAR International iRacing Series. There's a mistake up the road. Justin Campbell went way too deep in the final corner, and it opens up the inside for Garcia in the run down to turn 1.
Just overshot the corner entry in terms of the brakes, and this is going to open up the opportunity for someone like Maggi to be able to try and dive. Multiple different mistakes. Garcia overshot the corner aggressively, trying to hug that inside of the racetrack. Just couldn't make it stick and had to lock up the brakes to prevent sending that car off.
He had the opportunity to make the pass, courtesy of a mistake. He lost that position in turn, courtesy of a mistake. So he will hit the reset button and try again. Garcia now at a race low P12. And Maggi, the one in the middle of all of this, who's just been the constant through all of it. Hasn't been making the errors that the other drivers have, but also hasn't been able to capitalize on them as well. Looking up to Trayton Lapsevich, the driver of the number 20 machine, representing the NASCAR Pinty Series, trying to make a pass at Raja Karuth in a battle for 8th and 9th. These drivers started back-to-back in 10th and 11th, and they've been able to work their way through the field pretty successfully in the opening few laps. Not without incident, though. The onboard shot shows you that Lapsevich has got a little bit of front-end damage. His back has got it as well. And up the road, even Raja Caruso and some battle scars on his number 13 Chevy.
And I think for Trey Lapsevich, the amount of damage that's on his car, in particular with that front end, is going to impact him down the straightaways in particular. It can really impact your ability to be able to draft on by and drive on forward. As well, though, with that back end damage, is going to really affect the amount of downforce. As Raja Karuf really struggling in the arena section once again, locking up those front tires, trying to prevent from going off track.
And doing his best to just keep this thing reeled in, but that 20 Machida Lapsevich gave him a little bit of a break that time. Maybe could have been more aggressive, but we talked about patience being key. Doesn't force the issue. And this duo continues to fight. Look at all that extra racetrack that these drivers are using, though, Justin. Another theme of that Brands Hatch race to open this series last week was that if you took a step too far, you were in the grass. There wasn't a lot of space. We saw lots of drivers into the tires, lots of drivers into the Armco. Here at COTA, there is a ton of runoff space. So, yeah, you do need to worry worried about track penalties and slowdown penalties for cutting the track and track limits, but at least it's a little bit more forgiving on the mistakes as Caruth now gets up and alongside the 20 Machida Lapsevich trying to defend his position, and again, will hold that number 20 at bay for the time being.
And in turn, it allows the opportunity to prevent you from sliding off into the grass into one of the tire walls or get significant damage around the racetrack than you further have from the car-to-car contact. But at the same time, noticing the frustration starting to potentially build up from Lapsevich in this battle, it seems Trayden feels like he may be held up right now in the midst of all this and wants to try and make the move. That's why he's so aggressive on some of these passes, all while P6 is getting very aggressive.
And that is Nicholas Sanchez, who is going to get moved out of the way. I think there was a touch there from Paul Jourdain. Sanchez was the biggest mover of the race. He was a +6 from the start of this race, but he will lose a spot after quite the aggressive dive bomb by Jourdain at the end of the straightaway. Just completely moved the number 12 car out of the way. So Jourdain moves up. He'll take over the number 6 spot for now, but Sanchez wants some payback, and they are all over the place as back here the battle continues between Caruth and Lapsevich. Sanchez is trying to pay back Jourdain. There is aggressive driving now all throughout the field. And look at this, 2 sets of 2x2 in a battle for 8th on the back. And again, another definitive defensive move there by the 13 of Caruth to cut off that 20.
Yeah, that actually used up a lot of the door of Trayden Lapsevich. This is losing them even more time. They've lost 4 seconds or so to that battle for 6th position. They were only a couple seconds back before all this started to flare up over the past lap or so. As one driver already making their way to the pit lane in front of them, Nicholas Sanchez coming in.
Yeah, I wonder if this has to do with all the damage that he has on the 12, right? He had a ton of pace. And then he tried to make a little bit of a run at Paul Jourdain to push him back out of the way, and Jourdain kind of tapped the brakes to avoid that dive bomb. And I wonder if this is a early pit stop. Let's take a look. So you're on board with Jourdain here. You can see the closing distance, and the car wobbles a little bit. I wonder if he locked it up. There's the touch to Sanchez. Does he move him out of the way? Absolutely. Didn't dump him. And then what you didn't see is in the 2 corners after that, Sanchez went back after him, but he is quickly in and out of the pits. It looks like a scheduled stop with 4 tires in field, Justin. And as we pick up the battle for 3rd and 4th position with Zufro and Morales, I guess that brings up the point of strategy in this race, which we really haven't talked about in a 25-lap sprint.
And we were expecting, based on the field numbers, drivers to potentially just try and simply go for the 1-stop, Evan, because less amount of time in the pit lane equals being able to, in turn, just have the 1-stop. But the thought process, I think, for Sanchez might be trying to go for the undercut, get himself on some fresher tires, see what he can do, and try and power his way forward on the racetrack and utilize the undercut to see what it can have happen. Oh, by the way, Trayden Lapsevich finally clear of Raja Karuf in this battle for position.
He finally gets by, and now we'll see if their pace is there for Lapsevich to be able to pull away with this one. Remember, it seemed like he had so many opportunities to get around Raja there, but the 13 machine not dropping it back at all. Had a good look that time on the dive down to turn number 12. Can't make it happen, and Now they'll work through this back half of the racetrack. 13, that right-hander. 14, and you work through the back half of the racetrack, the stadium section here at COTA. I do like the decision, Justin. There was some question marks when NASCAR Cup Racing came here to COTA. Would they run the full-length circuit? Would they run one of the shorter ones? And I think this full racetrack circuit is such a good one because you got those three very different parts of the circuit that really challenges drivers in all different manners. Of course, the S's on the front half, you got the heavy braking zones down into 1, down into 12, and then the stadium section, all unique challenges that you would lose if you went with a shorter circuit.
Absolutely. This track brings plenty of challenges as a result, where you have the S's we talked about in their difficulty with the sausage curves. You have Sector 2 with that long back stretch, which allows the opportunity to build up runs and for be able to have dives. But the arena section in particular, the very technical part of the racetrack, brings it to where you have the challenges of trying not to overrun the racetrack, trying to make sure you weave your way properly around the circuit. Keep in mind that that section is going to be pretty busy in a section with this battle. Well, here coming up with Jufro and Morales Jr., who are bumper to bumper for third spot.
And he is working him over hard, again looking to get around Jufro. Can't do it. Of course, we talk about NASCAR embracing esports, and NASCAR's international divisions have certainly done so as you ride with the 39. I think all three of these international series have run their own iRacing series, similar to what you see in the Pro Invitational. And for Victor Morales Jr., the driver who's been driving in the NASCAR Peak of Mexico series since 2017, was the 2021 NASCAR Peak of Mexico iRacing champion. And he'll make the dive hard on the brakes, but he misses the corner. Jufro backs it up. He'll now come for the counterpunch using every inch of the racetrack. And despite blowing the one corner, Morales holds on again, now locks it up, and the 64 gets by.
That was the use of the runoff area we talked about before that you can utilize at times, but the second time just carried way too much speed, again missing his braking mark to be able to properly hold on to the position. And for Victor Morales Jr., gonna have to take the time to reset. And this is allowing Pilot to slowly crawl his way back into the conversation. Keep in mind, running 3 to a full second quicker right now compared to the cars in front. Rather 3/10 to a full second quicker.
And then Glimpse on board, but the 66 machine showed a bit of damage, so he clearly got bumped around a little bit early in this one. But Pilot, that dominant win at Brands Hatch, a racetrack that he'll need to be competing in just this upcoming weekend with Hero NASCAR. The 17-year-old who has made his career through karting will be making his Hero NASCAR debut this year for Speedhouse and trying to close, or for Paul Jufro, I should say, making his debut this year. The 17-year-old running in third position, trying to hold off some of the more experienced drivers like a Simon Pilot. Of course, won last week and finished third in Euro NASCAR's esports series over the course of the last year. So the common denominator, Justin, and we touched on this as we go back to the battle with Raja Caruth and company, Justin Campbell, another one of the Drive for Diversity drivers out of the United States, in the middle of the battle with Jake Cozio just behind. The NASCAR Peak Mexico competitor, Justin, is in these international series. Here stateside, what's the background? Short tracks, legends, modifieds, late models. Overseas, a lot of this is in touring cars, is in karting, and I think that's why these international series, who have much more road racing historically than what we've seen here in the NASCAR Cup Series stateside, have to be so good on these road races.
Absolutely. It brings different backgrounds and it makes things so unique when it comes to racing internationally. Just the differences on how racers are brought upon throughout the racing careers, how they're able to battle around, where they're able to learn the various marks, how to learn the technical parts of being able to learn about the cars themselves, as well as how to drive around the racetracks. All of that comes into different playing styles and driving styles, I should rather say, from the different backgrounds. And it can make things intriguing in the different areas to, say, come straight from a go-kart to a stock car because of the background. It can make things pretty tricky. So it's been interesting to see how these drivers have adapted throughout this series to attract such a Circuit of the Americas, or like last round to Brands Hatch.
And Justin Campbell, through the midst of all of this now, leads in the fight for 7th position on back. Make him the biggest mover of the afternoon. The 15-year-old out of Griffin, Georgia, +7 from the start of this race. Plenty experienced on the sim with more than 120 wins on the service. Back towards the front, the saga continues between Paul Jouffreau and company, trying to hold off Victor Morales, who's back down to the inside. Pit stops towards the rear as Cozio will come down pit road, but door to door in the battle for 3rd and 4th position. Justin, back at the end of the straightaway, the last lap again, Morales made the pass, locked it up, overdrove the corner, but in the S's, he may have finally put the pass on the 64.
And I think he had to back up and allow that opportunity for him to go there, because that was not a section you wanted to enter side by side. You enter side by side at the S's, it likely leads into very significant contact as a result. But just behind them, keep in mind, Pilot is creeping on in as we look back at Jouffreau and how much he's having to wheel this car. Really struggling on this long run at the moment with the tires. Follow off right now has been, at the very least, 7 seconds from the first lap of the race.
Yeah, some of these drivers have gone way off. In the case of, Paul Jouffreau, his best lap of the race came early on. Lap 1 was a 2:15. He's at a 2:22 down, so that's where you get that huge fall off. And looking is Simon Pilot, but unlike Victor Morales not wanting to be so aggressive, he'll tuck in line, reset, and try it again. Overshoots the corner just a little bit, but he will try it again. Pilot looking to get another good finish to back up the win from last time out. The Euro NASCAR 2 competitor keeping the pressure on Paul Jouffreau, who tries to defend what right now is the number 4 spot. But clearly, once Morales, Justin, was able to get through, look how much that 39 Haas machine has been able to pull away. Took a while on the execution. The fact that he's pulling away tells us that he does have that speed. And what can he do now from 3rd spot almost halfway through this race?
I think right now it's just a matter of thinking about how your strategy is going to come into play, as well as make sure you don't make any major mistakes. So allow situations like this, as that was an issue for Pilot in practice. Pit entry, overshooting that lane. He did that several times when trying to prepare for this race, locking up those tires and nearly hitting to the tire barrier. A tough moment there for Pilot, going to cost him some time.
It is a tough break, and we'll take a second look at how this shook out. You're going to go on board here in the run to the pit entry. You can see following traffic in front, and it just locked up, wouldn't turn when it turned. Fortunately, made the decision, Justin, to stop turning that wheel, right? If he tried to lift off and get those wheels to unlock, he could have ended up in the tires, realized he was missing it, locked it up, slowed it down, cost him a little bit of time, but avoids it being a catastrophic incident. About, I would say, a half a dozen drivers have been down to pit road, but your race leader, Agustin Canapino, has not down pit road yet. The Argentinian has led every single lap of this race after being fastest in practice, fastest in qualifying, but a spin out behind. It's Giorgio Maggi in the 14. I believe that was through the S's and may have been another case. And you can see he's doing the slow down now, letting drivers go. Probably got a little bit too much of those yellow curbs. The one positive, Justin, is that on the sim, the only thing the yellow curb's going to do is hurt your time. In real life, you hit those curbs as hard as some of these guys have, and you'd have some pretty destroyed race cars.
Yeah, it's teeth shattering and definitely suspension demolishing how hard some of the bumping and banging along the sausage curbs can get. It can make things very difficult as a result to make your way through the corner. But what a dominant run to get back towards that point with the race leader of Agustin Canapino. Lots of sim racing experience, also a 14-time champion in the Argentina Touring Car Series. It's been incredible to see him power his way around this road course today.
And when you're in control, you don't need to get too fancy on the strategies. So crossing over to halfway home in this second round, Canapino is down to pit road, and should it be no shock to call, there are going to be 4 tires fuel and get off and away and make a run down to the end of this contest. Picking up the battle for 12th and 13th. We saw that spin, though, earlier for Maggi, and I talk about the curbs. Watch on the right-hand side of your screen. In the S's, gets a little bit over the rumble strips, and that thing nearly flips. How aggressive that hit is, Justin. And again, in the sim, all it is a spin out, but in real life, that's a good way to destroy a car.
We've seen how big that suspension jetted out as well, too, when coming back onto the ground. It was a significant amount there of rebounding from the springs as a result of that touch to curbing. So it is why we're seeing the top drivers trying to avoid those yellow sausage curbs at all costs in that part of the S's. You can get away with it in this one corner here, but other than that, it's been a tricky portion of the racetrack all throughout the preparation, all throughout the race today.
So through all of this and the pit cycle, the 75 machine of Lead Alpernia has yet to pit and cycles through to be the race leader thus far. Looking now, most everybody has completed service. Maggi into the pit lane this time. There's some drivers who have been out there for a while, the likes of Delara, Rainier, Servant, but they all had pit stops early after being involved in incidents. So I believe Pernia at the front of the field, the only driver yet to come down pit road. The fight continues on for third and fourth. Nicolas Sanchez trying to hold off Paul Jouffreau. Jouffreau's been in a battle basically every time we've checked in, Justin, with that 64 tonight. Sanchez a new foe, but he sees the 64 has got the speed, yields him that position, and he will wave him on through, I thought, in turn 11, but he was just setting him up for the crossover. Drag racing down the backstretch, beating and banging at 150 miles an hour.
And one of the major traits when it comes to Sanchez on iRacing is he's not afraid to be aggressive, and this is a move like this.
Turns him down to turn 12. We talked about the aggression. He was parked right on his door, and as soon as they got under braking, they just got hooked together, could not get off, and Paul Jouffreau is turned around into the inside wall at lap number 13 of this race.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about that with Sanchez there. That was a very, very tight squeeze there with the braking zone. Essentially just maybe not as straight down that line as he was expecting there, and definitely cost Jouffreau a ton of time on the racetrack. Here's a look at it. Remember, 4-lap undercut made by Sanchez, and this is right about where he tries to pull back the 64, try and get a run down the straight, try and keep it door to door, and just right about here is where things get tricky. Jouffreau gets the better run. Sanchez tries to keep it buttoned up, and right there, the deeper braking, and bye-bye 64.
And I had to just assume that Sanchez was letting him go the way he left the inside of the racetrack open in turn 11 with those older tires, but fought him back and touched. And what a tough break for Paul Jouffreau, the Frenchman who finished second in the season opener at Brands Hatch, JP.
Yeah, that was intriguing to say the very least once again, but if I'm Jouffreau, I have to try and keep myself focused, because guess what? It's not over. Sanchez is still holding up now 3 cars into a train for third position.
Yeah, Sanchez started in 12th, so he gained all this track position by going for the undercut, but now he's on the older tires. That's why he's at the disadvantage. It'll force Simon Pilot way to the outside. They're in the grass trying to make this pass, and Victor Morales Jr. will get through. The 12 tucks back in line. This time he'll go to the bottom and dive bomb. Again, all over, forcing the 39 wide. You can't say that Nick Sanchez is taking it easy. He is racing these cars hard. I just feel like it's going to be a losing battle, though, on the old tires. Let's see what Simon Pilot can do. He rides P5, looking to make a pass, but does not dare to try it now. And look at the dive bomb to turn 12. Again, Sanchez so aggressive, and the 39 Morales is going to go the long way around to make the move.
Of note, the 75 Pernia has come down to pit, but look at all this with Jourdain now joining the fray. Don't forget you have Jouffreau, who is also in the midst right behind all this as well. And at this point, if I'm Morales Jr., I'm running away, because this is the perfect opportunity to build up a buffer.
Yeah, and I want to get away from this battle. As you can see, all of the cars fighting in the battle for fourth on the back, and it's basically the team up on Nick Sanchez battle. Most cars either 5 or 4 lap fresher tires. Another bit of a contact there. Jourdain gets into it with the 66 pilot. He'll swing out to the outside, and now Jouffreau back down on the bottom, trying to make up for spots after his spin.
Oh, and more contact as Jourdain all over the door of him.
Sanchez is just blocking the entire racetrack all the way to the inside to block. Look at Pilot from behind. A glimpse of 3 wide to turn 1. Again, Sanchez hard on the brakes, but too hard. He overdrives the corner and pushes Jourdain out of the way. The 8 car was already hit by the 12 earlier, and something tells me that the next time Paul Jourdain gets to Nick Sanchez, he'll make sure the pass is no doubt about it. Look at the 12 on the curb, misses the corner, keeps on going. Nick Sanchez, the madman, finally gets a slowdown penalty, and those 3 drivers will escape.
What an incredible battle, to say the very least. And it's still not over back there, I don't think. Sanchez still wants to fight on the older tires. You got to give him credit. He always races hard, and he shows that right here in this battle, still not giving up with Jourdain.
And Jourdain again going to get dive bombed by the 12. And Justin, I don't think I've seen the 12 Nick Sanchez make a dive bomb to the inside stick a single time. He continuously overdrives the corner. It's probably a little bit of the older tires, sure, but I think the reason he's so slow is because he drives the tires off it, and maybe finally that comes to an end. Meanwhile, a little bit more of a cordial battle between Paul Jouffreau and Simon Pilot. They want to pull away in their own battle for P4.
Yeah, much more calmer compared to what we've seen, to say the very least. If I'm Jouffreau, I'm just trying to cool down those tires and slowly make your way around the racetrack. The tough part is doing so when you have pressure from behind. And Simon Pilot, we've seen, can be very dominant when he's in a good rhythm. And right now, Simon Pilot, after all that, is still in a good rhythm right now, in my opinion.
He has been pretty calm with these moves. He's seen a lot of aggressive ones. Pilot hasn't been one of them, and he's just going to keep the pressure up on this battle as he tries to chase down Jouffreau for 4th and 5th position. But we are coming to 10 laps to go this time by. It is action all over the racetrack, but the Augustin Canapino show continues from COTA. You're watching week 2 of the eNASCAR International iRacing Series.
I am a season no one saw coming. Not that it's a bad thing.
I'm ready.
I am something none of you expected. And each surprise leads to one heck of a summer. Because this year, to make the playoffs, you better win, or you're not in. And one thing is for sure this season, I am not certain what happens next. And neither are you. I am NASCAR. I am a driver with a dream. And part of that dream is making all the doubters believe that my name belongs here. I may be new to some, but I am not to be taken lightly.
Oh, and now they're really going at it. Yeah, they are.
Because if you let your guard down, I will rise above. I am the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I am NASCAR. I am chaos in a good way. I am everything you want to see at once. Coming at you like a comet on fire. I am bumping, banging, and battling to the finish.
It is all on the line.
Because if you can conquer this series, you can conquer anything.
That was some intense racing.
I am the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series. I am NASCAR.
And back live from virtual Circuit of the Americas as iRacing's coverage of the eNASCAR International iRacing Series continues tonight for week number 2 from virtual Austin, Texas. And happy that you're with us, streaming at enascar.com/live. It has been a wild race, mainly in this mid-pack battle. We were riding on board there with Nicolas Sanchez. He just got passed by the 51 of Jake Cozio, one of the drivers representing the NASCAR Peak of Mexico Series, but the 12 of Sanchez, Justin, has been an unrelenting opponent in a lot of these battles for position. Meanwhile, further up the road, the battle that we left on for 4th between Paul Jouffreau and Simon Pilot sees a third driver enter the mix as Paul Jourdain wants to join the battle. His 8 Toyota been one of the faster cars in the mid-pack the last lap.
Jourdain's done a very impressive job throughout this race so far today. 2:19.744 last time by. He's been able to properly and execute very well his way through the S's. And you can see from Jouffreau as well, compared that to some of the others, how he's taking his lines a little bit tighter in the S's, just able to build up a better run coming off towards turns 10 and 11 to make his way around the racetrack. And that's one of the main executing portions of why Jourdain is starting to pounce on these cars in front for position.
And way to the outside, you see Jourdain go there using some of the runoff space. So look at the difference in approach to that corner. Jouffreau left the bottom open. It allowed Simon Pilot to think about it, but that wider entry into the corner is really going to benefit the run for Jouffreau here as he'll get the better run off of the corner. And we talk about that trio. Well, the trio behind them races on. Jake Cozio ahead of the 12 of Sanchez, and Ruben Garcia wants to make some moves, driving his way through the field. You're on board with him. NASCAR Drive for Diversity alum as in front. Sanchez wide, gets into Cozio, and Garcia could be the big winner in all of this. He'll be in the middle now. Now he'll touch with the 51 and go wide. So a rocky road for Ruben Garcia, Justin, who kind of a crossover driver, right? Representing the NASCAR Peak of Mexico Series in this, but he's a Drive for Diversity alum, a 2-time race winner in the NASCAR K&N Pro Series, and 3-time champion of the NASCAR Peak of Mexico Series. He's done just about all of it.
Yeah, very impressive driver to say the very least when it comes to the world of NASCAR. And right now, in the midst of all this, keep in mind, Garcia trying to hold off Caruth, Campbell, and traded Lapsevich all been built back up in a run as we look at the battle once again for 4th.
Line them up the hill, about 149 miles an hour to 1. There's the dive to the inside by Pilot. He'll squeeze the 64 out and give it to last week's winner, Simon Pilot, now back to where he started this race for the first time in a long while as he retakes the battle for 4th, Justin. Funny enough, because in the mid-portion of this race, I was telling him, how patient Simon Pilot had been, but clearly in the second half of this race, he wants to be more aggressive. We'll see if anybody else can get back to him in the battle for 4th on the left-hand side. And then the battle that includes Raja Caruth, Trayton Lapsevich, and Justin Campbell is on the right-hand side.
Oh, and that was a little bit close if I seen that in that midst of that battle. You're bumping and banging with Trayton Lapsevich on the right side, and you're bumping and banging on the left side with Jourdain trying to make the move now, and Jouffreau. Both of these groups are getting very feisty around the areas where you don't expect to see side by side.
Yeah, that was a curb, I think, that set Caruth way out of shape, and it was a stellar piece of driving for him to be able to hang on to that race car. Most of the drivers who we've seen get curbs that aggressively tonight have been sent way out of shape, and Raja was able to catch that race car and just keep it on the racetrack. The 19-year-old out of Washington, D.C., driver in the ARCA Menards Series Ace of the NASCAR Advanced Auto Parts Weekly Series for Rev Racing, and Max Siegel, of course, a well-known streamer on the platform for Space Station Gaming, and you can see those Space Station colors on his number 13 Chevrolet as he is in this, a quartet for about position number 8 on back.
Yeah, that was incredible, to say the very least, that car control. Indeed, we talked about how big the suspension rebound can be off the curbing here at this racetrack, and that was one of those moments where any other driver, potentially, it would have gone the other way, or any other slight movement from Raja Karuth. But for Karuth, he's someone known for on the sim itself, more towards the oval side compared to the road course side, but he's definitely showing his road course racing chops with saves such as this one from this bump.
I mean, that thing's up 35 degrees, and then he gets loose, but look at all the front wheel input, right? Turning that race car, avoids the second curb. If he got that one, it could have been catastrophic, but he never left the racing surface, never went into the runoff, aside from when he made that initial touch, held onto the car, no speeding penalty, and somehow Justin didn't even lose a spot when it was all said and done.
And that's the most impressive part. He didn't even lose any positions. That's incredible to say the very least, as we look back at Jourdain and Jufrel once more battling for position. It's going to get interesting to see how the 8 fights here in these closing stages for this spot to get up back to Simon Pilot. Pilot last time by a 2:21.6, 2:22.1 for Jourdain.
Exchanging some of the faster lap times. You compare that, though, to your race leader, Augustin Canapito, whose last lap was a 2:19.0. That 86 is in an absolute class of his own, much like Pilot was last week, who was under fire on the left-hand side of your screen by Paul Jufro, looking to the bottom as he tries to make the passes. Paul Jourdain, actually, who leapfrogs Jufro, is going to try to get both passes done in a single lap, and he will. Using a bit of extra pavement there, no harm, no foul. And how about Paul Jourdain's number 8 car? Caught up to this battle, he gets 2 passes done in a single lap.
Yeah, and I think the main thing that got the job done was just able to get a better run coming out of turn 11 to be able to diamond the corner and build up momentum or that back straight to turn 12, and that's how the job got done. But keep in mind, battle's still not over either for about 9th position. Justin Campbell doing an impressive job trying to make it a +5 on the race, currently a +4, one of your biggest movers on the field.
And you saw some locking up on the right-hand side. There were points in that Brands Hatch race where we saw some drivers separate themselves, and then old battles kind of pick back up towards the end, Justin. I don't know if we've gone an entire lap so far this afternoon at COTA where there hasn't been some sort of action on track. The biggest thing I pick up is when somebody makes a pass, that's not the end of it, right? They're not able to just drive away. We've seen it in some select instances, but so many times somebody makes a move and they are right back under fire. Look at this dive now, down into turn number 1 as that battle for 4th works around some lapped traffic in Andres Perez de Lara, who's the first car lap down, getting out of the way.
And the traffic being very cordial here. As we talked about, not expecting too much traffic here overall for the race. But in terms of positioning yourself now for some of these battles, it's going to be the tough part. You're towards the back end of the run where the tires are at their most worn in. Justin Campbell's got the freshest tires out of this grouping, going on for about 9th position or so, compared to some of the others who are a lap or 2 older tires. So Campbell's got that advantage and potential for that grip to be able to try and fight for this position. It's just a matter of doing it properly at the moment.
Of the 19 drivers who started this race, 17 of them are still on track. David Delara, Jaden Arena have gone to the garage after being involved in some incidents a little bit early on. Not going to make it the distance, but we are in the home stretch. There is snowboard strategy card to fall, much like the race last week at Brands Hatch, a one-stop race. We saw some drivers go for a little bit of an undercut 4 or 5 laps earlier than some in that middle portion, but it seems that everybody's pretty much got the speed that they've got now to the end of this one. More lap traffic staying out of the way. That is, again, Perez de Lara, but don't look now, but Trayton Lapsovich, Justin, is at the caboose end of this battle. He was just hanging the back end out through that last corner, chasing down Campbell, and then, of course, Caruth and Garcia, the other drivers in this fight. We haven't seen Lapsevich make that many moves tonight. He started 11th. That's where he runs, but he wants to join the party up here. Don't count out that 20 for a couple of late race passes. Lapsevich, of course, notable driver, will be competing for Rookie of the Year honors in the NASCAR Pinty Series, but he's also the younger brother of 2016 Series champion Caden Lapsevich. So, fun fact there.
Yeah, and that was an impressive championship back in the day from Caden Lapsevich to be able to power his way on forward through said championship. Currently does a lot of racing himself still across North America. As right now, look at this. Caruth has an opportunity on Garcia.
A little bit of a four-tire slide for both of those cars. Raja will leave room to Garcia with an opportunity to fight back. He'll get pinched out, though, on the entrance to the S's. Down the wide side, trying to come on through. Look out. Almost a touch there from Justin Campbell. I thought for sure Campbell was going to get into the back end of Garcia there. Lifts at the last moment. Cuts him a break. The graduate through the NASCAR Drive for Diversity Youth Development Program. Trying to get in on the fun. Got to be a cool experience for some of these sim guys, right? Of course, Raja has that real-life experience. But for somebody like a Campbell, most of that comes on the sim. You're racing against the three-time Peak Mexico champion. You're going toe-to-toe with him. Look at this, as Raja Caruth wasn't given a single inch of asphalt on that run. He had to use the runoff all the way down in the dive to corner 11, but wants to stay in the mix. Garcia wins the battle and moves Justin Campbell now to P9.
Keep in mind, Trader Lapsevich is also ready to pounce the second things heat up once more, because all that fighting brought him a few car lengths back into the fight. Last time by, picked up as much as half a second on some of these cars. And you can tell a lot of them burned up the right rear tires and the rear tires in general, lighting them up throughout some of these corners.
Great stuff. Four drivers on top of each other through 22 laps of action here from Circuit of the Americas. Drivers are putting on a show in this International Series race. A bit too aggressive as Caruth got into Garcia, but a nice catch and recovery by the 88 machine. This racetrack has really allowed these drivers to fight back. You get a good inside position into the one corner, you try to set up a pass, but the following corner, you're on the outside, and that is what allowed drivers to defend, to fight back, and to put on the action that we're looking at now. Again, this battle is all the way from Justin Campbell on back, and Caruth on the bottom now makes a move on Garcia in that final corner.
Caruth, though, couldn't get the power down and just really lit up those back tires once again, trying to get through the gears. So that allowed Garcia to drive right on by easily. And Caruth, at this point, it's going to be a struggle to get towards these final few laps of this race. It's just a matter of trying to make the power plant on down. When he gets the grip to stick, he's able to build up some decent runs to be able to pounce on back. The problem is, when he gets loose, that's where he's losing all the time as a result of it.
We can see it there. Caruth had an opportunity to get to the right-hand side of Garcia, but didn't want to do it because it would have put him on the outside for the following corner. And Drayton Lapsevich is going to lose a little bit of time after he nailed that same curb that Caruth did in his spectacular save a little bit earlier on in this race. It was almost an identical copy. Hit it hard, lost time, but was able to catch that race car. Lap traffic going to stay high as they work their way around Regina Servant. Lets these guys fight this one out, and hounding Garcia is Caruth, who will take the inside four-tire slide and make the pass in turn 11. But here comes Garcia fighting right back. That's been one of the funnest corners on track tonight.
It's been incredible to see some of these drivers and how brave they've been there, because even when they're not side by side, it's been one of the more pivotal corners overall, because if you don't get a good run on the exit, you can't set yourself up for a pass right here before the arena section. And so many drivers here too have overshot part of the racetrack and went off into that runoff area. It's been incredible to see some of the bumping and banging around this circuit, but as we approach the final laps of this race, it's going to be where it's going to get more and more harder, as we talked about, with this grip going further and further away. Caruth going for it.
Again, on the inside against Ruben Garcia. unable to make the pass. But this is kind of the perfect example of the point that I was making, where most of the time in a road race like this, somebody's faster, they get up to them, they fight for a couple of laps, and then once they make the pass, they're able to drive on through. Has not been the case tonight. Of course, Ruben Garcia looking to improve on his position, finished 8th in the season opener at Brands Hatch, running 11th right now after having started the race in P6. Remember, had that spin early on and just hasn't been able to bounce back since. If he never spun just and he was in P6, he'd be way away from this battle. But that spin early is what trapped him in this mid-pack, and it has probably made him one of the hardest working drivers in the field tonight. Probably hasn't gone more than a lap or two without having some sort of driver attack him.
Yeah, and that can be so difficult to try and get yourself back into a rhythm if you've only had a few moments to be able to breathe. Because here's the thing, this is a rhythm racetrack, Evan. If you can't get into a rhythm, it's so hard to get yourself back into it. When you're battling constantly, you're having to defend constantly, look in your back mirror, try and hope that there's not a dive coming, try and make sure that you're pulling away from the cars behind. You're essentially panicking a little bit, and in turn going to lose yourself some time. So it's something you need to be smart about, as well as something you need to be able to test your patience with. And that's where some of the preparation turn comes into play, is being able to prepare yourself mentally as well as driving wise for these types of fights.
And now maybe in the closing laps of this race, next time by, going to be 2 laps to go. Your race leader's already taken 2 laps to go, but these cars more than 1 minute off of Canapino. You can see the top 3 at the top of your screen have not changed in some time. Dying laps of this race, maybe seeing the end of some of these fights. Jake Kozio wants to get back up and into the mix, though. He looks for a late opportunity to get around Paul Jouffreau. The battle for 6th and 7th position as they run right now. There's a look by Kozio to the outside. Tries to make the pass. It's a double apexer. They touch, and he will move Jouffreau out of the way to take that spot. Jake Kozio, the driver of the 51 Toyota 2018 NASCAR Mexico FedEx Challenge Rookie of the Year, and the 2019 NASCAR Peak Mexico Series Rookie of the Year, making some late race passes that puts him to +7. Now the biggest mover on the racetrack.
Yeah, and remember, at Brands Hatch also had some exciting battles. He had some great speed as well, Jake did, especially at the end of some of these runs, but overshot the corner again. This may allow an opportunity for Jouffreau to be able to pounce back if there's another mistake like that in these closing stages.
He finished an impressive P4 in that Brands Hatch opener. We talked about the dominance of the NASCAR Whelen Euro Series drivers, finishing 1, 2, 3 in that one, but the NASCAR Peak Mexico Series drivers represented strong. Mexican drivers finished 4th, 5th, 6th, 8th, and 9th in that season opening race at Brands Hatch, and are trying to represent well. You got Morales, Jourdain, Kozio, all names inside of the top 6. So they are certainly doing their job here this afternoon. And I think looks like he's going to be able to run away with this one. At this point, Justin, they're just treating that runoff like part of the racetrack. I don't think anybody stayed inside the red.
Yeah, and remember that a lot of discussion for the railroad race was the trickiness of running on the paint here on the sim. It can still be tricky to balance things out when it comes to that runoff sections, to be able to stick on the racetrack and make sure you're going to the grass. But for Augusto Canapino, it's been domination, Evan.
It has been. That's been the story for both rounds of this eNASCAR International iRacing Series as Canapino takes the white flag. 1 lap to go here from COTA. At Brands Hatch, it was the Simon Pilot show, but this afternoon, it's been the Augustin Canapino show. And Justin, no shocker, you can see the Williams Esports colors on that number 86 machine. You talk about the mixed levels of experience for these real-world stars here on the surface. Canapino, one of the best on iRacing, regardless of that crossover factor.
Yeah, he is a very, very strong sim racer who is competing in various different levels for road course action across the service, and makes it to where he's one of its quickest drivers, especially in some of the top iRacing special events in the world. It's an incredible driver to see. He's an incredible driver that's very consistent as a result of it.
Yeah, and in plenty of race cars, too, as we watch some of these other battles continue on. In 2019, got called up to race in the 24 Hours of Daytona for June Coast Racing in the DPI class, finished 8th in class. In 2018, was awarded the Argentinian Sportsman of the Year award, winning the Olympia de Oro. So it has been some impressive accolades over the years for the driver of that 86 as he heads to the stadium section.
So while some of the battles have started to calm down a little bit, Trey Lapsovich looking to pull away from Ruben Garcia. We also have Pilot trying to pull closer to Jourdain. So some incredible battles throughout this entire race. But for one driver, Agustin Canapino, he's been the most consistent throughout his marks all day today to be able to pull away from all these battles.
There was a lot of hype around the 86 and a lot of questions about what Canapino could do in this International Series to debut his skills against some of the other drivers from NASCAR's International Series. Didn't start at Brands Hatch, but tonight has been in complete control as he will close out the clean sweep. Fastest in practice, fastest in qualifying, fastest in the race. Canapino, your winner at COTA.
Give credit to Pernia as well in second position for much of this race. Very consistent and very solid on his marks as well, Evan.
So good as well. 17 seconds the difference, but impressive in his own right as Pernia comes home for second. And how about Victor Borrales? Up 5 positions, maybe one of the most consistent drivers we've seen through the opening 2 weeks of this eNASCAR International iRacing Series. Finished 6th in the opener last week at Brands Hatch. He will improve on that this afternoon at a turn 20. Victor Borrales Jr. gets a career best P3.
Very impressive drive in some very impressive battles. So you look still at Maggi among the final drivers who will come across the stripe, just trying to wheel this thing home. Make sure to keep it within those pavement, those curves and the paint on the circuit.
That's the key. Just get it to the end of this one and just finish it out. Giorgio Maggi was 11th in the opener. He's going to have a little bit of fun with it as well, Justin. We were just saying he should take it easy, be careful. Nah, he's going to slip and slide that number 14 machine. Some 12 seconds ahead of Abraham Calderon for 13th position. Maggi was 11th last week. He will be 12th this afternoon in Austin, Texas. A slide to the line. He comes home 12th. Calderon not that far behind. And that is everybody to the checkered flag here at COTA. Let's take a look at our eNASCAR full race results. Second week in a row, it's pure domination. This time, it's the NASCAR Peak Mexico Series drivers who show out, JP.
Indeed. Absolute domination from Canapino, Pernia, and Borrales Jr. up at the very front, and put Jourdain in that grouping as well. Give a shout out to Cozio as well. And for some of our drivers, even with some of the lower standings for drivers like Roger Roof and Giorgio Maggi, they both had some very impressive moments in this race, to say the very least, Evan.
And there was a lot of great action. For the most part, I think all of the drivers who were fighting really hard hurt themselves in the finishing order by being involved in so many battles for position. But they certainly put on such an exciting show for us here this afternoon. And that's all that matters, right? There is no official championship for this. These drivers are coming out to have some fun, and good to see after the story of the Euro NASCAR drivers dominating in round 1 that the NASCAR Peak Mexico Series drivers seemed to impress this afternoon in our first race in the United States at Austin, Texas, Justin. And already now 2/3 of the way through this championship as we look forward to Daytona, which we'll talk about in just a little bit next week for the final round of this 2021 campaign. But Canapino got his money's worth tonight. As I mentioned, went for the sweep, was untouchable, bested in practice, bested Q, and was fastest by a mile in the race, Justin. You're standing by with tonight's race winner.
Justin, a very dominating performance today, very consistent on your marks. First of all, what did you find to be able to be so consistent around this racetrack here tonight?
Hello, everybody. Thank you to NASCAR Mexico to invite me. I'm very happy with the performance. The track is very tricky, very difficult to drive. Kota is, I think, the most difficult track in the world in the racing, and I'm very happy. Very fun race, and with good pace.
Good place indeed. And when it comes to this track, you mentioned it, talking about one of the most difficult tracks to be able to go to, if not the most difficult. What were some of the challenges in preparing for this race tonight to be able to properly execute and make sure you didn't make the mistakes you may have in preparation for this race?
I think the more difficult part in the race was the qualifying, because in this track it's very difficult to do a perfect lap without off track. I think this is the most difficult part in this race.
Indeed, and in the end, you were able to pull away by more than 18 plus seconds for the checkered flag. Congratulations, Augustin. A dominant performance here today at Circuit of the Americas.
Thanks. Thank you, and thanks again to NASCAR Mexico to invite me.
Dominant performance, Evan, to say the very least.
It certainly was, and I'll agree with Augustin's comments there that, COTA is such a tricky racetrack, Justin. This racetrack was designed to host the U.S. Grand Prix, and a lot of racetracks at that level of racing have been around for so long, right? They have so much history. A really unique opportunity when bringing that kind of racing back to the United States to build a brand new modern facility and to basically design what you would wish to be your perfect racetrack, and was not designed for stock car racing, let's be honest. But NASCAR went there this year. It was an incredibly successful weekend in terms of race attendance. The race, it was exciting, and it has translated well here now to several great races on the sim side, in the Coke Series, in the Pro Invitational, and now tonight in the International Series. 2 straight weeks of really good racing.
Absolutely, especially in the mid-pack, where you had a lot of great fighting, some great strategy, and some intriguing moments, to say the very least, and some impressive saves, especially with some of the turtles and sausage curbs, or drivers like Ranja Karuf to be able to keep their cars from spinning out and going off into the grass or towards the edge of the runoff areas. It was impressive, to say the very least, Evan, some of these performances to, in turn, come away with some good momentum to close things out.
And we talk about familiarity. Well, lots of our drivers have raced here. Round 3, last round of this eNASCAR International iRacing Series, Justin, heads next week to the World Center of Racing. The virtual Daytona International Speedway plays host on the road course next Wednesday, 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, for what should be a thrilling conclusion.
It should be an intriguing race, to say the very least. The Daytona International Speedway going to bring some challenges in the infield, but bring a lot of speed heading off into the exit of NASCAR 4.
And we hope that you join us next time out. Of course, if you've enjoyed the action on track today and want to get involved, now's your opportunity to join iRacing. With iRacing, every day is race day. Log on to iRacing.com for more information, up to 40% off new iRacing memberships. Till next time, though, that is it for us here this afternoon from Austin. On behalf of our entire team at NASCAR and iRacing behind the scenes, and for your broadcast team tonight, for Justin Prince and myself, Evan Pasoko, I want to thank you for tuning in and congratulate Augustin Canapino, representing the NASCAR Peak of Mexico Series, your race winner today from COTA. We'll see you next Wednesday from Daytona International Speedway. That race and every race of the eNASCAR International iRacing Series can be found here exclusively streaming at eNASCAR.com.